let's talk. Let's talk about some of Let's talk about some of the juicy stuff. Let's talk about some of the comic books. Let's talk about some of the characters. Um,
Look! Look, the dynamic duo! I got
so so for us as fans, right, our experience is a little bit different, and the way that we experience comics is by reading them and enjoying them and loving them. And for me, there are moments, there are times, Stanley Kirby, Thor, Fantastic Four, John Buscema, Thor, Sal Buscema. I mean, those stories stand out for me. And as I've said earlier, one of the stories that absolutely stands out as part of my life is your run on Spider-Man with Ron Friends, particularly because your run on Spider-Man with Ron Friends, as well as your run on Thor with Ron Friends. And the reason for my love for that is twofold. For Spider-Man specifically, I felt that you harkened back a little bit to the Stanley Ditko era and brought us Spider-Man in a powerful light. I hated sometimes the depiction of Spider-Man as a weaker character. And later on, in more modern comic books, they portrayed him as this new kid on the block who didn't know what he was doing, who was the butt of the jokes. I absolutely hated that. Your Spider-Man was strong. He was capable. He wasn't Captain America. He wasn't the leader of the team, but he could kick Firelord's butt, basically. And that's one of my favorite storylines. So tell me about that, if you don't mind. Tell me about your run on Spider-Man. What's your perception of the character? What was your point of view? And also for Thor, some of the storylines for Thor. And I was rereading, I promise you, Tom. A couple of days ago, I met my brother. He brought me a couple of comics. He was just like, hey, listen, we're together. We're in Tennessee. He says, here, out of the blue. And it turns out it was your comic with Ron Friends, not even knowing we were going to interview you. And I was leafing through the book, and I promise you, it captured me in a way that no modern comic book could capture me today. And I just loved it. And so just tell me your approach with these characters. Tell me what your favorite storylines were. Tell me what you thought of Spider-Man, and that specifically Spider-Man versus Firelord story.
Boy, that's a lot to unpack.
Sorry.
Well, like I said, Ron Friends and I used to discuss the characters, spent hours and hours discussing the characters, and then we throw a few ideas against the wall as to what the story would be. And then somehow or others, the story would write themselves as long as we understood what the characters were. And I always thought Stan Lee's greatest contribution to modern comic books was that he brought soap opera to comic books.
Yes.
It wasn't the characters with the feet of clay. He did that, but it was the soap opera aspects. He made us care about Peter Parker's life. He made it, who's Peter dating? What's going on with, Peter? So every issue we wanted to see what was happening to Peter. Fantastic Four, the same thing. We cared about the characters. We cared about their lives. So Ron Friends and I used to look at this stuff as a big extended soap opera. We wanted to make sure that you cared, if it was Peter Parker, you cared deeply about Peter and his relationships and what he was going through at the time. If it was Thor, you cared about Thor and his secret identity and all the people around him. And we always worked very hard on the supporting cast to make sure that the supporting cast came across as real characters, real people with a real situation. I think we achieved that the best with SpiderGirl, because
yes, that's another
fantastic.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's another great run, impactful in our lives.
And we were just working on working on the soap opera, making sure that we had all these emotional things happening to our characters. Now Peter is, Peter Parker is a great guy, he's a powerful guy, he's a successful guy, except he can find the dark cloud behind every silver lining.
That's right.
He, no matter how well he succeeds, all he does is look at what he's done wrong. In a regard, it's a lot like me and Ron friends. We would work on our issues, and then we would go over the issues and rip the panels apart. We didn't need this line of dialogue. We didn't, we could have, this panel did not contribute enough. We should have done this, we should have done that. And we would second guess ourselves as we were working on things. So we were kind of like the best guys for Peter Parker, because we're constantly second guessing ourselves. How can we make this better?
Fascinating.
So, the bottom line for Peter was, Spider-Man to me is all about responsibility. And every story should, in some way, shape, or form, touch responsibility. You've got two responsibilities. You've got a responsibility to protect the city. You've got a responsibility to do what Aunt May wants. You've got a responsibility to your girlfriend. But these are all colliding within each other. So you've got to choose the best path. And those are the best Spider-Man stories.
Absolutely.
Where, even though he succeeded saving the city or saving lives, he let his girlfriend down. He let Aunt May down. He's a failure.
Absolutely.
So hard. And Peter, Peter always took things from kind of like a negative point of view. Because Peter failed when he was Spider-Man. He failed to stop the burglar, and as a result, his uncle died. So Peter looks at Spider-Man as a way of atoning for the failure. He did the flip for SpiderGirl.
Right.
Okay, SpiderGirl, her parents were in danger. So she succeeded and people lived. Spider-Man, he fails, people die. SpiderGirl, when she succeeds, people live. So SpiderGirl was a much more positive, proactive character, because her thing was all about success. As long as I succeed, people are going to live. So she wasn't tainted by that failure, that death. People kept saying, "Oh, she's got to have a death. She's got to have a death." No,
exactly.
Her responsibility comes from success. That we can make a difference, and that's why to many degrees, Spider-Girl was a much more positive message than Spider-Man.
My next question for you, and I'm sure our audience wants to know, between either any of the characters at DC that you worked on, or especially Marvel, who's your favorite villain?
My favorite villain?
Villain.
Dr. Doom was always great because, Dr. Doom, he wanted to bring peace and prosperity and, end poverty and war and crime. And all he asked in return was total blind obedience. Dr. Octopus is kind of like the reverse Peter Parker. He's the guy Peter Parker could have grown into.
Yes.
If he got his powers that much later in life. Loki was always a lot of fun.
Thank you for saying that.
With Loki, you never knew what he was going to pull next. Sometimes he'd help Thor, sometimes he'd hinder Thor. You just never knew where Loki was going to come down. And so I often found Loki a lot of fun.
Thank you for saying that. I know for myself and from Loki is one of our favorite characters. So thank you.
And I think Tom Hiddleston does a fabulous, fabulous Loki.
It's we actually did a past show, and he was part of a major portion of the conversation relating to Loki and the upcoming streaming series and what have you. He is really good.
He's fabulous. He's fabulous, as are most of the Marvel Universe actors.
If you don't mind my asking, was there ever a point when you were developing the characters when you made changes that you wish you had not made? Or you had a storyline that you honestly, for all the success that that you had, or Ron Friends was having, or what have you, or anyone that you were working with, where a storyline wasn't working for you in the long run, and you either killed it or wish you hadn't done it?
You know, I can tell you one time, Ron Friends and I had worked out a couple of issues. We knew where our next bunch of issues were going to go. We worked out a plot. It was the one with the puma.
Okay.
And we knew how that story ended. And in the course of it, Puma shows up at Peter's apartment, and Peter throws Mary Jane out of the apartment. And he's supposed to explain to her at the end of the issue why Puma came to his apartment. We had a whole explanation, and we knew what the next 3 or 4 issues were going to be, and we had it all approved. And then, as I was typing the plot, I got to that point, and Peter starts to give his explanation, and I had Mary Jane. I just typed in. Mary Jane goes, "Stop it, Peter. I know you're Spider-Man. I've always known." And I just typed those words and then looked at him and thought, what the hell?
I love that.
And I called up Ron, and I said, listen, that the story, I have a different ending for it. And he goes, yeah, what is it? And I told him, and he goes, what? And then he goes, wait a minute. That makes sense. And then he explained to me some scenes in previous stories that gave proof that Mary Jane had always known. And eventually we took it to our editor, who had the same reaction, no, and then, oh yes, it makes sense. And then got to the Peter, who had the same reaction, no, oh wait a minute, it makes sense. And then we had to throw out like the next 4 issues that we had already plotted, because now the story took a different turn.
Gotcha.
And a lot of times we would work out where we were going. We knew where we were going, and then we would get a better idea, and then the story would take a left-hand turn.
Gotcha.
That's a bold move. And then to me, what it means is that, again, it's that relationship between the creator and the character, that intimacy that you talked about earlier. That's the key. And my question would be, was that something that you organically did on your own? You happened to care for the characters, or was it something that Marvel dictated? So, for example, when you were editor-in-chief and you were hiring a new writer, did you say, okay, research the character so that you know what you're talking about? Or was it just assumed? And I asked that question to lead to another question, which is, what I feel is that the shift of creators that came after your generation, our generation, didn't have that connection, didn't have that respect. They basically created their perception of the character. And so my question is, for our generation, for your creations, was it something that was imposed, or was it organic that you just felt the need to do it on your own?
I think it was organic, that we all felt the need to do it on our own. And I remember a lot of times I was talking to young writers, and they try to do something with Spider-Man, and I'd say, wait a minute, you can't have somebody sneak up on Spider-Man because of the spider sense.
Exactly.
And they'd say, well, I don't care about that. I think we should get rid of it. And I said, no, the spider sense is what makes him unique.
Exactly.
you know, get around it. Be creative. Don't get rid of things that are inconvenient. Be creative and figure out ways that you can use it to your advantage. You know, we were doing comic books for people from 6 to 60, or I used to say 16-year-olds of all ages.
Exactly.
And, you know, as, you know, people said, no, we're doing adult books, you know, doing comics for adults. The adults are the wrong marketplace. I'm sorry. The adults are the wrong marketplace. When you're, you know, 10 years old, you have an unlimited source of income. It's called your parents. everybody's parents have plenty of money.
That's right.
You know, more than enough money
Absolutely.
to buy either sex or cars. One or the other. Money becomes finite.
That's right. That's right.
And then once you become an adult, you question every expenditure. You know, you're going to go out and buy lunch.
Absolutely.
But you say to yourself, yeah, should I get tomatoes on that sandwich? It costs an extra quarter. Ah, what the heck? I like
You're budgeting. You're budgeting. When you're an adult,
but you're always budgeting once you become an adult.
Exactly.
And I used to say, hey, you know, when you're doing it for 16-year-olds of all ages, they have unlimited money. You don't have to worry about it. but adults, you know.
No, but that's actually well said, because to me, and I think Kevin feels the same way. To me, that's what, I don't want to say killed the industry, but is killing the industry. That's what started the death tolls for the industry. That misunderstanding of who your audience is. And there was a shift to, okay, our audience are adults. And we forgot about the 16-year-old and all of us and all the age ranges. And that's why now, as a full-on adult, even now, as I told you, when I read comics, and I try to be objective, there's some modern comics that I absolutely love, like The Walking Dead. I love that series. I enjoyed Planet Hulk, even though it wasn't 100% Hulk. But 90% of the material that I read, superhero related, just doesn't retain my attention. Whereas when I pick up a Ron Frenz, Tom Defalco of Thor, it was one of the issues that to this day, I don't know how I didn't read that issue, but it was like, boom, I am captivated. It's there because it captures the whole gamut. And it's not unsophisticated. One of the things about this show is that we're purists, and we fight for the original creations, and we value the original creations. We say that it wasn't childish, it wasn't stupid or beneath intelligence. There was a lot of depth within those stories. As you know, even your words, your wording. I wish I had a comic in front of me that I could read the wording of your text. It's brilliant stuff. It's really good stuff. And so it's a shame to me that that respect didn't continue, and I wonder how you feel about that.
Well, it's hard for me to comment about today's comics because I don't read a lot of the contemporary comic books. I discovered that when I do, I either get bored quickly,
yes,
or you know, or the characters just don't sound right to me, and you know, there was a writer who did. I don't want to mention his names. He had written a number of books, and I really enjoyed his writing. I thought he was a terrific writer, and he was doing a series for Marvel, and I thought, wow, I love his other stuff. I'm going to buy I'm not going to buy the comic books. I'm going to buy the trade paperback when it comes out.
Gotcha.
And I bought the trade paperback, which had the first 6 issues of his run. And at the end of that trade paperback, I thought, the story has not started yet.
Yeah.
I've read it. I've read a complete trade paperback, and I don't have a complete story. And I'm thinking there should be six stories that are complete, and maybe you add all 6 up. And it's a bigger story if you add all.
Absolutely.
I was so disappointed. I remember I had lunch with some of the guys from Marvel. I said, listen, I bought my last Marvel trade paperback because if you're not giving a full story in a trade paperback, what am I supposed to do? Tell my publishers, hey, I'm going to write a novel for you guys, but I'm not going to tell the whole story. You got to buy the next novel to find out how it ends.
Yeah.
I could see the next panel is my publisher throwing me out the window.
Absolutely.
I often go back. This is an old boring story where, many years ago, an editor said to me, it was for a mystery property. He said, listen, I need to see a dead body by page 5. If I don't have a dead body by page 5, I'm not going to page 6, and neither are you. and when you're doing a novel, you have to start the novel on your first page. You have to grab the reader's attention on your first page. When you're doing a movie, especially an action movie, some bit of action within the first minute. Think of the Fast and Furious, the Marvel movies, the James Bond movies, the Mission Impossible movies. Something big happens right away. When you're reading a comic book these days, sometimes you're in the 3rd issue before it actually starts.
Yes.
I'm sorry, they're too expensive.
Oh my God. There are comic books where it's just panel after panel of just dialogue, two people, and Spider-Man, Peter Parker is sitting there talking to Captain Marvel for 3 pages. It's a Spider-Man, Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And it's that whole maturization of the genre to make it.
I don't think it's the maturization. I think it's the failure of craft. Guys are writing the wrong kind of story for the medium.
Well said.
Comics are a visual medium.
Yes.
What they're writing are radio scripts.
Yes. Yes.
Those are scripts that are, are totally dependent on the dialogue. If you want to write radio, write for radio.
Yes.
If you want to write comics, write for comics.
Yes. Well said. Well said.
Understand the medium.
So let me ask you this now, which is an interesting and somewhat different discussion. What's your feeling on the cinematic verse of the Marvel, universe? Like what they've translated, whether it's from the animated to the movies, what's your feeling seeing some of your work being translated into the big screen?
Well,
this looks like a job for Superman.
Hey, look! It's SpiderMan!
The dynamic duo return next week. Don't listen.